beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. This is part 4 of my Foeder guide for homebrewers, and this part focuses on my next steps with my mixed fermentation Solera sour beer project. So let's get started. Ever since the process is shown in part 3 of this series, the beer mix in my Foeder has been gradually changing, mostly due to the presence of 2 types of Brett that have been eating away at it and adding in their own flavours and effects. I have been carefully monitoring these changes with small samples every few weeks, and things have progressed much quicker than I expected. At under 6 months later, I am pleased to tell you that this has already developed very nicely, and I am keen to have a keg of this on tap for the remainder of this summer. The Solera mix has also dropped very clear, as you will note from this photo. My first next step was to start brewing another batch that will replace what I removed from the Foeder into a keg. This essentially has the same recipe as shown and fully explained in part 3 of this series. There are some differences though. The first being that I brewed a lower volume because I simply needed enough to top up the Foeder after taking out 19 litres for a corny keg. I made it 21 to be on the safe side. Furthermore, to add in some variation to the mix in the Foeder, I changed the recipe to have a short boil time of 30 minutes instead of the standard 60 minutes used in the last recipe. Naturally, the shorter boil is becoming much more popular these days for brewers, and it is no secret that I enjoy the difference in the end beer and the time saved. Due to the shorter boil, I had to use an extra 6 grams or 0.2 ounces of hops, which is simply nothing in my book. The other big change this time was that I used fully sour yeast instead of using a kettle sour and then a further yeast for fermentation. This made for an easier process, and I have found that fully sour does a nice job when combined with a suitable grain bill and fermentation profile. This recipe worked nicely along with a fermentation temperature of 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Once again, I decided to ferment in the brewing system just like I did previously, simply covering the glass hole at the top with an unused cloth to stop anything getting in or out depending on how you look at it. By the next day, fully sour had started doing its job, clearly shown here with this beautiful white blanket of Krausen. Within 10 days it was ready with a consistent FG for 3 days. This is pretty good going for fully sour, and this end result can certainly take longer. Perhaps the open fermentation aided in this, and it could be that a wild yeast joined the party. I had an NPH of 3.4, so clearly fully sour did that part at least. If a wild yeast did actually join the party here, then it certainly didn't cause any disruption, as the predicted FG was 1.012 and my taste testing was pleasing. Contrary to popular misconception, wild yeast can certainly be a good thing, or in some cases simply awesome. The full recipe used here along with these changes are shared in this video's description along with a Brewfather link. This can be found underneath my videos on the computer version of YouTube. On the day that fermentation was complete, I started the next process by transferring from the Foeder into my keg using the methods and equipment outlined in part 2 of this series. Preparation is certainly key here to ensure that everything is clean and sanitary, and after this the transfer is very simple and effective as long as you avoid splashing. This may well be a sour beer, but the usual rules apply to not spoil it. Once this was complete, I then transferred the freshly fermented new beer from the brewing system using its pump and an extended piece of hosing from its recirculation arm down to the bottom of the Foeder, as fully explained and shown in part 3 of this series. My Solera mix is now 3 different parts, and this will remain until next summer, giving the whole mix much more time to develop even further. Let's now take a look at this first generation of the Solera, which is in its earliest form, being made up of just 2 parts, starting with the pour. As you can see, this is very clean clarity wise and has plenty of head and carbonation. Absolutely no finding agents were used, just simply time. I have this pressurized at 12 psi for serving, and the beer is stored at 5 degrees Celsius, which is the equivalent of 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's now get some tasting notes put in place, starting with aroma. The aroma from this beer, unlike the rest of it, is actually quite simple. Here we have very fresh citrus that has undertones of pineapple, which makes this rather welcoming. When it comes to flavour, on entry I detect a cherry-like flavour with some apple that quickly moves on to a citrus sourness that finishes very smoothly despite being rather acidic. On the finish you are left with some mild spicy flavours that blend nicely with the sourness that is accompanied by a little oak in the background. This is certainly a great refresher for hot summer weather, and it drinks well as a summer session beer where multiple glasses provide some variations in flavour. I note that for a mere 2-part Solera this has not had a lengthy time to mature on the Brett, and it's surprisingly complex already. I wish that I could fast forward to next year to taste the 3-part Solera that will then have a year to mature. Certainly there is a fantastic start on this Solera that already really proved to me that this Foeder project was well worth the investment. I believe that obtaining a Foeder like mine is certainly very worthwhile, especially if you're interested in a Solera sour beer project like this. If handled correctly according to this guide series, a Foeder should last you a very long time, and the resulting beers that you take out will continue to improve as the Solera mix evolves. This is the last part of this series for this year, but you can expect an update next year in time for the summer, where I'll be sharing my next steps and taste testing for the 3-part Solera mix. Please do let me know of your suggestions for the next part that will be added within the comment section of this video. I would like to thank Foeder Smith for their help in creating this series this year, and I very much look forward to what next year will bring and beyond. I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!